Hello my dear health seekers, Inga from Health Origins here, and I'm very sorry that I'll have to voice over this video because my audio did not work for some reason. So today I have an exciting recipe for you. It's vegan biscuits, oil-free vegan biscuits. If you fancied something sweet but wanted to avoid the margarine and the oils from the store-bought biscuits, this is the recipe for you. So the recipe I'm using is adapted from Demuth's cooking school recipe in Bath that I've attended, so thank you very much, ladies. And I've substituted the margarine in the recipe for a nut butter. So in this particular recipe I'm using peanut butter, and the previous batch that I made, the cookies you can see on the table there, I made from hazelnut butter. And I would suggest using more neutral tasting butter, such as cashew butter perhaps, or almond butter, instead of peanut butter or hazelnut butter, if you don't want the taste of your butters in the actual biscuit, because cashew butter will give you a more neutral biscuit where you can taste your add-in flavorings better. For example, like we're going to be using lemon zest, or if you're going to use cinnamon, other spices, raisins and so on, so you'll be able to taste them better if it's not overpowered by a very strong nut butter like peanut butter. And it's so easy to make your own cashew butter, and I'll link to the recipe in the description below and in the card above as well. And I'm also saying here that this recipe is so versatile because you can add so many different additions. You can add the ingredients you love, so if you love sultanas, you can add them. If you love cinnamon or different spices, you can add them. So let's start the recipe. So for the base, we're gonna start with dry ingredients. So you need 120 grams of whole grain flour, so whole wheat flour. So this is the Dove's company, made from a softer wheat variety, so it's almost mimicking the white flour because it's a softer wheat variety. You could probably make from any whole grain flour, it should work, because these cookies don't rise much at all. So 120 grams of whole grain flour. Then we need 60 grams of ground almonds. So I basically measured the almonds and I weighed the almonds and then ground them up in my spice grinder to get to ground almonds consistency. Then we need half a teaspoon of baking powder, and then I've got the add-ins, which is about 4 tablespoons of chopped up cashews. And then I've got zest of half a lemon in here. But like I said, you can experiment with your favorite add-ins, any spices or any nuts you would like, or cranberries or sultanas are also great additions. So now let's talk about what ingredients. So I already mentioned the peanut butter. So you need 100 grams of peanut butter. So instead of margarine, it's 100 grams. Then we need 75 grams of golden castor sugar. And you could use, for a healthier option, you could use rapadura or coconut sugar, milled up in the spice grinder again, or a food processor to resemble castor sugar. So like I said previously, it's not a health food. These cookies are still a treat, and they've got quite a lot of fat from the nuts and a lot of sugar. However, once in a while it's not too bad. So I've got a flax egg, and it's so easy to make a flax egg. It's basically all it is just 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed and 3 tablespoons of water mixed together, and you let them sit for 5 minutes. I'll link to the recipe with 5 egg replacements in the comments, in the description below, sorry, or in the card above. And then you need half a teaspoon of vanilla essence. And that is all ingredients. So we'll start by combining the peanut butter with the sugar. And you can either mix it with a spoon, but I prefer to do it with the stick blender. That's why I've got it here. So I'll be using my stick blender, and you want the mass to be nice, light and fluffy if possible, and the runnier your nut butter, the better that works, because my hazelnut butter was quite runny, so it worked really well. Whereas with the peanut butter, I was struggling a bit because it was much thicker butter, so I needed to add some water in the end. So I'm just gonna be adding my flax batter in there, and the vanilla essence, and then I'll be also adding 2.5 tablespoons of water to this. Because like I mentioned, it's quite a thick batter, and you want it to be a thinner consistency than this. You want it somewhat runny, whereas this one was quite sticky. As you can see, I was scraping the blades afterwards. It's quite sticky, but it needs to be quite, you know, like a thick runny consistency. In this instance, I've added water later on when I've tried the cookies and they were a little bit too crumbly. So I'm gonna be combining the dry ingredients now. So I've added the ground nuts into the flour, and then added a couple of pinches of salt. Then also, not to forget to add the baking soda as well. And then we're going to be combining the two together. And like I mentioned, the addition of baking powder, I'm not sure what it really achieves here, because the cookies don't really rise in my opinion. So perhaps you could try with and maybe try without and see how that works. But I haven't tried skipping it. And you can add add-ins at a later stage, or you could add them now. I prefer to add them to dry ingredients and mix it in, and then mix the dry and wet together. So I'm going to be combining the wet and dry ingredients together. As you can see, my wet ingredients are not so wet, so you could either add some water, a tablespoon at a time, to your wet ingredients to make it to a thick runny consistency, or if you'd rather combine the two together and then add the water to the final mixture like I did, it's up to you. The important part here is though to add about a tablespoon at a time and mix and see how your dough is behaving, because you don't want to add too much water because you want quite a dry batter with this. You don't want a watery batter. You want it to be quite solid because we'll be forming a log out of the dough for this. And when you see that the dough is pretty much going to stick together, then you finish off by kneading by hand, and also make sure the surface, the table surface you're going to be finishing it on, is clean and ready ahead of time. And you want to knead a little bit to gauge how sticky or how well the dough combines. However, you don't want to over knead this because you don't want the gluten to develop in the wheat flour, as then your biscuits will resemble bread more than the biscuit, because to make it a bit more like short crust pastry, you need to knead as little as you can. So after kneading it for another minute or so, I've realized that it's still a little bit too crumbly. It's not sticking into one cohesive dough, so I've added the last half a tablespoon of water, so 2.5 tablespoons altogether. And this is purely because, like I said, the nut butter, the peanut butter I used was much thicker, and it wasn't as runny. So if your butter is runny, then you shouldn't have these problems. You shouldn't have to add any more liquid. So as you can see now, the dough is sticking together rather well. So I'm gonna just continue kneading for a little bit on the counter. So you want to make sure you kind of compact it and press it to the middle, and make sure there's no air pockets or air bubbles in there. And once your log is pretty much solid, you can then shape whatever shape you like. Perhaps you want to do like a square or a triangular shape, or I prefer just a round shape. It's easier to form. So just make sure the shape is solid throughout, and you could form the ends of your dough sausage, as I call it, by pressing it onto the table. So I'm still rolling here. And then when you see it's about the right thickness you like, then you can pat the ends like this on the table to form nice edges, nice straight edges at the ends. And then this is your dough log, as I call it, and then you're ready to roll this up into either a cling film, or in this case I have some foil here, so you just roll it tight and then close the ends as well. And then now this can either be chilled in the fridge for at least 1 or 2 hours, or even better, overnight. Or if you don't have enough time for this to wait, then you can just place it for 15 minutes into the freezer, and it'll be ready to slice. So you need, once you either frozen for 15 minutes or chilled overnight, or at least for a couple of hours, you just slice them, as you can see, about 1/2 centimeter thickness, and then you put them on a wire rack with a silicone mat and put it into a preheated oven, 180, for about 15 to 17 or 18 minutes, depending on your hotness of your oven. In fact, even, you know, for some ovens 12 minutes might be enough. So I suggest you check your biscuits after 12 minutes and check when they're nicely kind of browned around the edges. And here I'm gonna just show you just the wire rack I use. So it's just the oven rack, and then I put silicone mat on it. I've tried baking these biscuits on just the rack before, but they might be too soft, and parts of it actually gone through the wire rack. So that's why a silicone mat, it works really great. And the best thing about this recipe is that after you slice your cookie dough into these cookie shapes, you can freeze them and keep them in the freezer until you are ready to bake them. So if you fancy something sweet, you always have some to hand in your freezer, or when an unexpected guest pops in, that's great because you can have freshly baked biscuits in about 15 minutes. So that is it, guys. Sorry about the audio again. I hope you liked the video. I hope you try it. Let me know what add-ins did you go for and which ones were your favorite. If you've got some great combinations, I would love to learn what you like, what's your favorite, and perhaps I might try and experiment as well. So, and if you're new here, consider subscribing for more videos from me on Wednesdays and cook-alongs on Sundays. Hit that bell button to be notified for all the new videos that come out, and share this video with a friend if you think they could do with a sweet treat recipe. And as always, remember, food is fuel, so be mindful of what you put in your body.